I see lots of unfamiliar faces today, which is very exciting, so welcome if this is your first time here. Just a reminder that if you want to join our mailing list, there's a clipboard in the back that we get you on our e-blast list, and we do not sell our list, so your name is safe with us. And if anyone can figure out how to hack us, good luck with that, because it's not really hackable. So, today is a very exciting day. I love it when we do our combo lecture music shows because we invariably learn something. And today, since I know very little about Gigi Gryce, I am expected to get lots of learning today. So before we get started, just a couple things. If you need to use the restroom, they're out in this hallway here to my, well, it's my right, but it would be kind of your left. And if you need to get up and want a refill or something during the show, we don't discourage it, but be mindful that there are others in your orbit. So also, we are in the middle of our appeal season, and to those of you in the room that have been amazingly generous with us, I cannot thank you enough. For those of you that would like to be generous with us, I would appreciate it. And there's some literature on the chairs and whatnot, or you can simply donate on our website, njjs.org. There's a lovely little red donate button at the top of the page. I want to say thank you in advance to Noel for championing this show today, as well as financially putting his money where his mouth is for this show today. So Noel, thank you very much. We appreciate it greatly. Yes, that's applause worthy. And so, without further ado, I'm going to have my colleague and the Jersey Jazz Magazine editor, Sandy Joseph, come up, and he's going to introduce our guest speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. If you read Jersey Jazz Magazine, you've probably seen some of the jazz history features, specifically on people like Lucky Thompson or Wes Montgomery. Those were written by our host today, Noel Cohn, who is a historian and a musician and a very good writer. And his website, if you'd like to learn more about him, is attictoys.com. But Noel is also very interested in bringing attention to jazz giants who may not have gotten the recognition that they deserved. And I think that's a subject of our program today is on Gigi Gryce, who is one of those jazz giants who really needs to be better known. So without any further comments from me, I'd like to introduce Noel Cohn.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So today, instead of the rising stars, you get an octogenarian. But I'll do my best to hold your interest. So I never knew Gigi Gryce, but I go back a long way to his very first recordings in the early 1950s. And they really caught my attention. And when I retired from my day job at the end of 1994, I decided to do something. Actually, what my goal was to publish a book of lead sheets of his songs. That never happened, but ultimately what came out of the project, and I didn't do this alone, is this book right here, Rat Race Blues, The Musical Life of Gigi Gryce, which, okay, now for the shameless self-promotion, this book is still available. You can get it from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or probably your local bookstore. It's an interesting read, I'll say that much. It was an interesting project, and we discovered a lot of things that I had not anticipated we would about this gentleman, this very talented musician, and other things. And there is an aspect of his background that fits in with Black History Month, and I'll get to that. It involves his efforts as a publisher. And I'll get into that a little bit later on. But let me just try to put him in perspective of jazz history. He arose in the early 1950s along with people like Horace Silver, Clifford Brown, Art Farmer, Benny Golson, Randy Weston, and these were all people who Nat Hentoff wrote in Downbeat were the up-and-coming face of jazz, and one notable feature of them, or aspect of them, was that they were not drug addicts, which, that's a terrible thing to say, but at that point, heroin was a serious liability that really affected the jazz community very severely. So, but these individuals had a lot of talent and showed a lot of promise, and they did in fact make a big mark, obviously, on jazz history. And Gigi started out, oh, by the way, Gigi stands for George General Gryce Jr. That's how he was, that's his given name. And, hi Jerry. And I'll talk a little bit more specifically about where he came from in a minute, but I'm just trying to put him in perspective. So in 1953, he records with Max Roach, and he records with Howard McGee, and he is on the very first recording that Clifford Brown made as a leader for Blue Note Records. And so already he's sort of on the map. But then he and Art Farmer and Clifford Brown, Jimmy Cleveland, are all members of the 1953 Lionel Hampton Orchestra. And they went on a very momentous tour of Europe and North Africa in the fall of 1953. That a chapter in the book is devoted to. Some crazy things happened on that tour. And they also made a bunch of recordings over there against the wishes of Lionel Hampton. They made recordings in Paris and they made recordings in Stockholm with local musicians. And those recordings were issued not only in Europe but also in the United States, and helped put these young artists on the map. He came back then, and he instantly, right away moved to New York City and started a very fruitful career. And his career lasted about 8 years, from about 1953 to 1961, and then he disappeared, literally disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to him, and I'll get into that story. But I just wanted to try to explain how he came on the scene, who he came on the scene with, and so now what I'd like to do is go back to the beginning and tell you a little bit about where he's from and his education and so forth. Gigi was born in Pensacola, Florida, on the Panhandle. It's the Deep South. Schools were segregated. He learned to play clarinet through FDR's WPA, the Works Progress Administration, which had put music teachers in various schools throughout the country in an effort to put people back to work during the Depression. And Gigi learned to play the clarinet, and then he learned to play the alto saxophone. he had some mentors at that time. An interesting thing about the first chapter of our book, which we call Pensacola Blues, is that the person that gave us some really important information about Gigi's early years was a pianist by the name of Donald Shirley. Does anybody remember that name? He was not really a jazz musician, but he considered himself a classical pianist, actually. And he grew up with Gigi and gave us just some incredible, from a historian's point of view, it's just gold, pure gold material about the early life of Gigi Gryce. He was drafted into the Navy in 1944, right after graduating from high school, and was able to get into the Navy band. And he never saw combat, but he was stationed in various places and honorably discharged in 1946. He then moved north to live with his oldest sister, Harriet. There were 6 siblings in the family, by the way, 4 girls and 2 boys, and all of them became educators, as it turned out, including Gigi. I'll get to that. They all became teachers. So he moved in with his sister Harriet in Hartford, Connecticut, and began to become part of that scene, and immediately applied to go to school at Boston Conservatory. And he got in, and he was able to do it because of the GI Bill of Rights, being a veteran. So Gigi took good advantage of government programs, which these days are not looked on so positively. So he spent 5 years actually in Boston, and it was during this time that he met Horace Silver for this first time, pianist Horace Silver, who was playing with Stan Getz at the time, Stan Getz's quartet. And Horace gave Stan Getz several of Gigi's compositions, and Stan Getz recorded them. And tunes like Melody Express, Wildwood, Hymn to the Orient, those were all Gigi Gryce's compositions that were issued on the Roost and Norgran labels. So even before he graduated from college, he had already some name recognition through the Stan Getz having recorded his tunes. Now, he took the entire year of 1951 off, and we're not exactly sure what he did at that time, but we think that he spent most of that time in New York City laying the groundwork for eventually moving to New York. And Benny Golson, who wrote the foreword for our book, indicates that it was in 1951 that he first met Gigi. So we're pretty sure that he spent a lot of 1951 in New York City. He did graduate in 1952, and then took a trip to Europe. Now, this is a very mysterious part of Gigi's life. What he told people, like you can find this in liner notes that were written later on some of his albums, that Gigi studied in Paris on a Fulbright scholarship. So in our research, we tried to verify this, but we could not verify it. So apparently he never was a Fulbright scholar. It's unfortunate to have to reveal something like that, but it's part of the history. And we're not sure why he told people he had a Fulbright, but that's what happened. And we think what happened was in 1952, after graduation, he took a trip to Paris and tried to study with people like Nadia Boulanger, and probably had a lot of problems with, if nothing else, language, because he didn't speak French. And so this didn't go too well, and he was back in New York in November of 1952. On the other hand, he immediately hooked up with Art Farmer, and they started to record for Prestige Records and made some very important recordings, both for Art and for Gigi. They were a perfect pair, by the way, musically, because they both were very lyrical players. And when you hear them exchange four-bar exchanges, it's like one person playing two different horns. That's how similar their conceptions were. Their solo approaches were very compositional and very well constructed, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. Gigi's first recordings were made in 1955 under his own leadership for the Signal Records label. Signal was not around very long, but those recordings were reissued about 2 years later on Savoy. And some of that stuff is still available if you're interested in it. These recordings were made in many cases with a nonette that had the instrumentation of the famous Miles Davis Birth of the Cool ensemble, if you can remember those recordings, which were made much earlier, at the end of 1949 and the beginning of 1950. And Gigi took that instrumentation and gave it new life. And he also wrote for the Oscar Pettiford Big Band. The bassist Oscar Pettiford in 1956 and 57 had a unusual big band which had 2 French horns. The brass section was 2 trumpets, trombone, and 2 French horns. It had a harpist, and Oscar himself played cello attached to an amplifier, which gave it a very strange sound. So it was a really very unusual ensemble that made a couple of really notable recordings. And Gigi did a lot of the writing for that band, as did Lucky Thompson and later Benny Golson. So unfortunately, the Pettiford Band was not financially successful and wasn't around very long. But what I'm trying to establish here is that Gigi was really part of the New York scene in the 1950s, and looked like, because of his talents, not only as an instrumentalist, but also as a writer, that he had all kinds of options open to him. And unfortunately, that never came to pass, whereas his friends like Benny Golson and others worked in Hollywood and worked in TV, and Gigi never did that. He dropped out too fast. So Gigi's peak year is 1957. That's when he hooked up with Donald Byrd and formed a quintet called the Jazz Laboratory. And they made no less than 6 LPs in 1 year for 5 different labels, including Columbia and RCA Victor. Again, it only lasted about a year. So one of the problems that Gigi had, well, there were several problems. One was he didn't like to travel. He wouldn't fly, and he didn't even drive. He never owned a car. And this really limited his ability to get a lot of work. In other words, he would only work in New York City. He traveled on the Long Island Railroad and the subway, but he never owned a car. So that was a severe limitation. And he was kind of a strange guy. Several people that I interviewed for the book told me he was a very nervous type of individual, very worrisome about, he was very untrustful, I think is the word I'm trying to come up with here. He didn't trust people. And so he wasn't hard to get along with, but he had a personality that made, a career in music rather difficult. But the inability to travel, I know because I interviewed Art Farmer. Art Farmer told me that was the reason they broke up, is because Art wanted to take work that Gigi wouldn't go along with. So those are a couple of the problems. But now let's come to the publishing thing. And Gigi was of the mind that musicians should never give up rights to their music. And he would always encourage people who were composers like him that not only played but also wrote music, which was a big thing in the 1950s. The bebop era, people were basically playing the blues, and I got rhythm changes, chord changes, and things like that. When Horace Silver and Benny Golson and Gigi and people like that came along in the 1950s, they really opened up the repertoire of what jazz musicians were playing with their original compositions. Kenny Dorham, Charles Mingus, John Coltrane. There were a whole bunch of really talented musicians who were also great composers. And Gigi felt that composers should never give up the rights to their music, should always protect it and hold on to copyright it, and don't give that copyright away. And what he did that was unusual, or unique actually, was to start a publishing company that published not only his music, but the music of other composers, the bulk of which were African American. At the peak of his publishing companies, he had two. One was affiliated with BMI and one was affiliated with ASCAP. At the peak of those publishing companies, there were 78 composers that had their music published with Gigi's publishing companies. This, of course, did not sit well with the record companies, who were in the habit of taking the publishing of any original music that was recorded on their labels. And they did several things. One was to simply not pay royalties to Gigi's publishing companies, which would necessitate Gigi taking legal action, which he did not have the financial wherewithal to do. The other thing they did was they were telling musicians, if you wanted your tunes published, if you wanted your tunes recorded on our label, you did not publish them with Gigi Gryce's company. So what happened was that the musicians started to take their music out of Gigi's companies. And this just broke his heart, because he really felt this was a very important thing to him, that musicians, especially African American musicians, should not be exploited in that way. There are a lot of rumors about what happened that led Gigi to drop out of the music scene. We could not verify a lot of those rumors. There were rumors like to the effect that his house in Queens was burned down. We don't think that ever happened. That he was attacked, that they killed him. Nobody killed Gigi Gryce. He died in his sister's house in Pensacola in 1983. But these are rumors that became etched in stone. We could not verify any of that. But nonetheless, Gigi did drop out of the scene and then reemerged. Nobody knew what happened to him. I interviewed some of the musicians that worked with him at the end, like Richard Wyans, the pianist. His last band was a band he called the Octet. It had Richard Williams on trumpet and Richard Wyans on piano, Mickey Roker on drums. And I interviewed those people, and all they knew was they just never heard from Gigi anymore. He didn't call them for gigs, didn't call them for recording sessions. And what happened was he dropped out. He became, and I hate to use this word because I'm not a psychiatrist, but he exhibited paranoid behavior. And it led to the breakup of his marriage. And so he was really at one point without anything. He had no work, he had no family, but he didn't give up. He, in the fall of 1963, he applied for a job with the New York Board of Education. And he got a job as a substitute teacher. And this ultimately led to him being made a full-time permanent teacher. But he didn't do it under the name Gigi Gryce. Early on in his life, he had converted to Islam. And when he came back as a teacher, he took his Muslim name, Bashir Qasim, as his given name from then on. So it was amazing. When we went to visit the school that he last taught at, which was PS 53 in the South Bronx, nobody in the school, this was about 2000, nobody in the school knew who Gigi Gryce was. They never had heard the name, except they had seen the name on a plaque that hangs in the foyer of that school. But nobody knew, nobody had bothered to ask in all the 20 years that he was a teacher who this Gigi Gryce was. Because the school was named the Gigi Gryce Bashir Qasim School. And it was named that way because he had established such an amazing reputation as a teacher that everybody loved him. His colleagues, the principals, the parents, and for the second edition of the book, I was able to interview a couple of his students. And one of the things that about Gigi was that he was a role model for these kids. This was an area that was, the kids were in educational jeopardy. It was not, it was a poor area, and the school was half African American and half Hispanic. But most of the teachers were white. Gigi Gigi, now Bashir, was one of the few African American teachers at the school. And the kids, because of that, really looked up to him. So he could run an assembly, like with clockwork, no unruly behavior. Nobody could believe it, how well he controlled, and taught these kids. So, I mean, to me, it sounded like he should have become a teacher in the first place, and saved himself a lot of grief. But nonetheless, he left us a lot of fantastic music, which you're going to hear shortly. And believe me, this band you're going to hear is Cracker Jack. You're going to really enjoy it. But so, just to sum up his life, he was actually a teacher twice as long as he was a musician, more than twice as long. But until we looked into this guy, nobody knew that it's really a tale of two people, right? Two different careers. But nobody knew this. There's only one person that knew it, and that was when he was a teacher, he had an assistant who was a pretty well-known jazz musician named Ed Swanston. Ed Swanston played with Louis Armstrong, actually. He played with a lot of people, and he was one of the few people that actually interacted with Gigi during his teaching period, because he had completely cut himself off. So it was mind-boggling to us when we got this story, trying to put it together, how it was really the story of two different individuals. So let's see. With that, let me just show a brief slideshow. Oh, there we go. All right, this is a fascinating picture, and I'll tell you why. This is Gigi and Clifford Brown in 1954 at Birdland. And what's interesting about this is a Francis Wolff photo. What's fascinating about this is this picture was taken on February 4th, 1954. Now that's the date of the recording, A Night at Birdland on Blue Note. Maybe you might have that album, or two albums actually, in your collection. The strange thing is, the alto saxophone player on A Night at Birdland is Lou Donaldson, not Gigi Gryce. So why on the day that they appeared at Birdland is Gigi playing with Clifford Brown? And what we suspect, and this is pure speculation, is that we suspect that Gigi was playing with Art Blakey and Art Blakey's quintet at the time. It was like a forerunner of the Jazz Messengers. In fact, in May of 1954, Gigi recorded with Art Blakey for MRC Records. It's a great album with Joe Gordon on trumpet. And so we suspect that Gigi might have been the regular alto player for Art Blakey, but Gigi was not part of the Blue Note record stable. Lou Donaldson was. So we think that maybe Lou Donaldson was on the recordings, but Gigi was playing with him at the time. That's pure speculation, but that's, you have to wonder, how could this be? But so this is not, this is in the book, but it's not anywhere else. That's a kind of a rare photo. Okay, let's see, what else have we got here? Okay, this again is, nobody's seen this. This is Gigi and Bud Johnson, great tenor saxophonist. And this is taken at the Randy Weston Uhuru Africa session in November of 1960. It was an all-star band with everybody. Everybody was in that band. Melba Liston. It was a historic recording, actually, and Gigi was on it. Actually, he's on alto there, but I think he actually played tenor on the session. He played mostly alto. Okay, this is Tommy Flanagan on piano, Thad Jones, and Gigi with his alto. And this is from a rehearsal for the Magnificent Thad Jones Volume 3 on Blue Note. Another great album with Benny Powell on trombone and George DeVivier on bass, Elvin Jones on drums. And so what I'm trying to show you is that, again, Gigi was, for the short time that he was around, he was very much in the thick of things. Okay? Played with all the best. Okay. That's Gigi and guess who? Quincy Jones, right. They were buddies. I forgot to mention that. Quincy Jones was in the trumpet section of the 1953 Lionel Hampton Orchestra. And actually those clandestine recordings that I mentioned early on, Gigi was sort of in charge of them in Paris, and Quincy was in charge of them in Stockholm. Okay, but they were buddies, and they both in the 1950s until Quincy, got really famous. He had his own band for a while. They were both writing. They were doing a lot of writing for people in the 1950s in New York City. So, I mentioned the Oscar Pettiford Orchestra. This is the Oscar Pettiford Orchestra. But this is not the one with the two French horns. This is a precursor to that. But you can see O.C. Johnson on drums, Oscar on bass. I think that's Joe, not Newman, Joe Wilder. I think that's Joe Wilder on trumpet, behind Jerome Richardson, Art Farmer, Gigi, Eddie Burt, and Danny Bank. So that's one you're not going to see every day. And this is 1955 at Birdland, again at Birdland. Okay, here's Gigi on flute. There's Quincy Jones again over on the left, and Charlie Rouse in the middle. And this is the Clifford Brown New Star on the Horizon, his very first recording as a leader. (1953).
Is that the one with Easy Living on it?
Yes.
So Gigi's playing flute on Easy Living?
Right.
Cool.
All right, I'm going to show you now some album covers. This is the album cover for Rat Race Blues. We took that as the title of the book. Rat Race Blues is also part of the soundtrack of a short dance film. Nobody knows about this. You can see this film on both YouTube and Vimeo. It's called On the Sound. It's 8.5 minutes long and has 3 dancers from the Martha Graham troupe. Thank you. It's very interesting. It's in black and white. It was filmed at an estate on Long Island. So On the Sound has two meanings. The choreography was done to the music. That's one meaning, and the other meaning is Long Island Sound, where the thing was filmed. And the director is Fred Baker, who did a documentary on Lenny Bruce called Lenny Bruce Without Tears. He described himself to me when I interviewed him as an auteur. He was actually started out as an actor, and he told me that he got Gigi to write the music for this film. He said his first choice was Charles Mingus. He went to Mingus, and Mingus said, "No, I don't want to do that. Why don't you try this guy, Gigi Gryce?" So he did, and this is something that nobody really... Okay, so the film won some prizes at various, film, what do you call it? Festivals. I'm getting tired. Okay. But it's really, it's worth checking out. But it's really, nobody knows about this stuff. There's a lot of stuff. And I'm not just pushing the book. I'm saying this because it was the discoveries that we made were just, really amazing. And that's why I'm trying to share them with you today to a certain extent. So the movie is called On the Sound, and Rat Race Blues is one of the themes that you'll hear. Okay, now here's a CD that you can't get anymore unless you buy it used. The co-author, Michael Fitzgerald, and I, we wrote the liner notes for this. It's on Uptown Records, which no longer exists. But I'm just showing you this because it's a great photo, but also because it has a collection of just about all the non-studio recordings of Gigi Gryce. All the, I hate to use the word bootleg, but unauthorized recordings were all put together on the CD. One part of it comes from a demo disc that Gigi recorded about 1960 that was stored at the Institute of Jazz Studies. And others came from eBay. Jazz music is all over the place. I just hope that people have enough sense to preserve it rather than throwing it out. But so if you can find that, there's some great music on it. Oh, it's also got from 1957 the sound from an appearance of Gigi on The Tonight Show. Yeah, that was a Signal Records party. And the band, there was Cecil Payne. It was Cecil Payne and Gigi Gryce, and Duke Jordan, Art Taylor, and I can't remember the bass player, maybe Julian Yule. Okay, this is an interesting album. This is only half Gigi. This is only half the Jazz Lab. The other side is the Cecil Taylor Quartet. And somebody recently, for Gigi's 99th birthday, I posted something about that on Facebook, and I put this album cover on. And somebody responds to my post saying that, "Oh, that's one of my favorite albums, but for the other side." But that's Donald Byrd, of course. And here's another picture of the Jazz Lab. This is the Riverside album with Wade Legge. Did anybody ever hear of Wade Legge?
Yes.
Great pianist from Buffalo. I actually played with him. Very nice guy, but I think, again, drugs. You know? And Art Taylor and Wendell Marshall on bass. Gigi in the middle. How are we doing on time?
You're coming in on time.
Okay. Do we have time to get
Yeah,
Bruce up here?
absolutely.
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yes, sure. Yeah, he taught music. Yeah.
When they were here, you said North Africa and they were camps. Why did camp not want to get
It was not just Hamp. That was kind of complex situation. There was the Young Turks, and there was the old. There were all, you know, Curly Hamner, and you know the old guard of the, and they were jealous of the young, of all the attention, because in Europe they had already heard some of these early recordings of Clifford Brown and so forth, and Gigi, and so they were kind of, Hamp and his wife Gladys, they were kind of envious of all the attention they were getting. There were fights, literally a serious fight in Algiers, I think it was. But yeah, so that was a crazy scene.
one last question?
Yeah,
Obviously, he was a man of conviction,
yeah.
lots of convictions, and the no driving and no flying thing. Any reason for that that you come up with? Did you ever talk about it?
I would say the horrible accident that killed Clifford Brown, of course, but that was 1956, and I think he was that way before 1956. Also, in the last band that he had was Eddie Costa. He played vibraphone in the Octet, and Eddie Costa was killed in an auto accident in 1962. So it might have been trauma from that. I don't know, but yeah, that was a big problem for him. Oh, okay, sure.
I don't want to take time.
That's okay.
You mentioned Gigi's route to professional musicianship through music education because he was a veteran in the GI Bill. How much of that particular route, that opportunity for African Americans after World War II to get a formal musical education, how much of an impact did that have on jazz composition in the 50s?
I can't tell you. I haven't really looked into that overall, but I'm pretty sure that many people. I know that, like, Gigi was stationed at Great Lakes, you know, north of Chicago, and at that time there were many African Americans that were stationed there, and I'm sure that after the war many of them took advantage of the GI Bill of Rights. But I don't have numbers.
Right, but
Yeah.
without a doubt, the 50s, jazz composition took a giant leap.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A giant leap.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, thanks.
Okay, I just wanted to hear from a player of today. I'd like to know, Bruce, if Gigi's legacy has informed your approach to playing jazz in any way. Here, let me pass over.
Sure. There was a time Ben Riley had a band called the Thelonious Monk Legacy Septet. And if you know anything about Monk, there's not that many alto players that have a blueprint on Monk's music. So in my research to figure out how I was going to play and fit in with that, I only found really 4 alto players that did anything with Monk that was like substantial. Ernie Henry, Lou Donaldson, Phil Woods, and Gigi Gryce. So some of the songs I was more featured on and more involved with playing the strongest parts of the melody, Gigi was known for playing, like Break's Sake and Gallop's Gallop. So I tried my best to put those players, particularly Gigi's sound in my ear, and you know, try to capture it as much as possible. I was aware of Gigi and some of his compositions. I was not as deeply involved in his music, but when I heard it, I always liked it. For many, I mean, they would call me more of like a Jackie McLean kind of disciple. But I would note that, like, we're gonna play Minority. Everybody knows Minority as being Cannonball. That's Gigi's tune. But for me, it's like a 60-40 split in my ear all the time between J Mac and Jackie McLean and Cannonball Adderley. And both of those gentlemen also recorded Minority. So there was some value in that tune and value in the person behind it that spanned beyond just what we know about Cannonball. I think as an educator, the one thing I find is plaguing is that young people don't listen enough. And young people, young players do not research beyond the top 5 or 10 mentioned on their instrument. It's a crime because it's as if no one else did anything, you know. And I don't like some of the stuff. And I'm in one. I'm in a Penguin Jazz book, but I don't like how it's separating people like as if they never existed. There's always great players in every town that no one knows about, or people get overlooked. I think, outside of what you mentioned about maybe about the mental, I think he got ostracized a little bit because of his work ethic and because he was not involved with drugs and alcohol and womanizing. Because if you really analyze it, almost everybody else had some kind of an issue. But I don't say it's an issue in the negative, although we know it's a negative thing. It was just culturally what was going on, and he stepped away from doing what everybody, like, I'm not going to join the club. I'm at the party, but I'm not going to join the club. Some of the myths that I heard about him that always made me a little bit more curious about him was about the publishing. Because I had heard that the mob was trying to infiltrate and threaten him. Like the whole story you always hear about, the horse in the bed or the fish on the doorstep, that allegedly happened to him and caused more of his problems. Now, I've heard this from other jazz musicians. I don't know. I wasn't there. But to think about how he retreated from it all, and then just in terms of his lifestyle, by not drinking, not drugging, and everything, that easily fit with him being a Muslim. There's no drinking and there's no drugging. You know, so I don't think it was such a hard stretch for him to find another lifestyle and still be positive and still be who he was. I just think it was a little bit tragic to just stop playing and being in the public eye. But I mean, there's been a few players in history that's happened to, like Frank Stroger stopped. You know, and they're kind of like contemporaries, really. You know, others moved on. Some people, the scene can be bitter. You know, and I think he saw some of that. From all the research I've done on him, that kind of brought me closer, you know, and wanted me to do him right, because I felt like someone mentioned about his convictions, you know, man of convictions and intestinal fortitude. I think it's important that we try to strive for that now, especially now.
Yeah, again, as far as these rumors are concerned, I'm not saying these things didn't happen. I'm just saying we couldn't find any evidence that they happened. And I'm sure he was not treated pleasantly by the record companies. You know, he was certainly intimidated, but whether it ever extended to violence or threats of violence, or twice I heard the thing about his house being burned down. His wife could not, you know, substantiate anything like that.
I don't know anything about that aspect of it, but the way it was told to me, you know, through mythology, is that he was really the influence on people like Benny Golson and Quincy Jones getting involved in their own publishing. You in establishing this stuff. So by the time he suffered, other people benefited. So, you know, he was the person that like took the licks for everybody else to move on, which happens in history all the time. It's just unfortunate because as we played this music, rehearsing and listening, my band members are like saying in rehearsal and calling and texting, man, it's so crazy how this is going on in this music, and we don't know about this individual as much as we should. It's overlooked. And I appreciate you having me do it and us getting to play this music because it's valuable to like count everybody, you know. As an educator, I often tell students to choose other people to listen to. Because if 10 saxophone players all sound like Sonny Rollins, why do I want to hire you? You got that other little thing, that's the other mysterious little thing, your pet thing that makes you unique. So, like, Gigi might be one of those things for somebody, you know, or someone else. It's just important to advance your listening and your learning and be more open, and take people's career as a whole arc, not in part, you know. And on that note, we're ready to hit it.
Okay. Thank you, Bruce. And thank you all for coming out today. It's been a big pleasure for me to be able to do this, and we hope that, I'm sure you'll enjoy the music. It's going to be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. We're going to take a quick 5-minute break, so we can reset the stage and get the guys up here, and then you're going to have your hairs blown back, because the rehearsal was amazing, and they only rehearsed for 5 minutes, so it was pretty great. So 5 minutes, and then we'll restart with the music. So I'm going to go ahead and do our wrap up now so that the guys can go straight up to 5-ish, whatever, so we don't lose a minute of music. But I want to thank you again all for being here today. I want to thank Noel for his generosity of scholarship as well as supporting the arts. After listening to Noel, this is why I refer to myself as a jazz cheerleader, not a jazz scholar. So it's amazing. It's just amazing to me, the knowledge and the depth of knowledge in the field of jazz. I just want to remind everybody that we have a show on the 2nd of March, which will be in honor of Women's Herstory Month. And we are having the Champion Fulton Trio and Champions program will be devoted to the music of the big band era, World War II female singers, and it's going to be a killer show. You're going to not want to miss that. There's also an amazing concert going to be taking place on February 16th at William Patterson. Jerry Weldon is going to be doing the music of Art Farmer and Benny Goldson. There's some flyers out in the foyer, as well as an amazing program on the 12th in Metuchen. There's some literature out front. So be sure to take and come and join in and be supportive of all things jazz. Lastly, I'm going to ask you to pick. Okay, we have a little gift for the ticket that says 438-3839.
Nope.
3839 are the last 4 digits. Everyone's scrambling for their glasses. I know my arm isn't quite long enough anymore. 3839. Woohoo! Winner, winner. And lastly, I want to thank John Petrowski and Caroline Romanelli, who work here at the Madison Community Arts Center. They do so much for us, and we could not be more grateful. So thank you very much. Yes, they deserve a huge round of applause. Yes. And so, yes, and please come back and join us, and like I said, join our mailing list and make sure you don't miss a minute. So, without any further ado, gentlemen, you ready?
Enjoy the history.
Drum roll? Drum roll. I can see the drummer. Esther, I do need a drum roll. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the Bruce Williams quintet. Bruce will do the honors for his bandmates. So, Bruce, bravo.
How's everyone? Tired of all that talking, man. I'm sorry. So, the great Freddie Hendrix on trumpet. The man with the bounce on the bass, Chris Berger. My homeboy from the DMV on piano. Great Al Bester Garnett on the drums. And I'm just Bruce. Chosen kind of a tough way to choose some music, a whole pile of music, and which one do I pick? So we reduced it a little bit, but still got a pretty good selection of music, largely stuff with Gigi and our farmer, since I have a trumpet there. And we'll start off with Senses.
Is it empty? Yes.
minority first because the chord changes are quite familiar. Sanssouci's based on Out of Nowhere standard, and minority's minority. We've been playing minority since we've been playing minority. And we're gonna play Shabazz, or Shabazz. It's coming from the Evening in Casablanca with Art Farmer. So let's check it out. play another one of Gigi's compositions. This is a little bit more well-known. It's called Nika's Tempo. What? I'll do that. No, you know what? Yeah, I know. So, hello. So you know the name of that song? Huh? That was Hello. I should have set up a prize. You know. Let me get that. Okay, now Nika Stemple. had it a little too hot for too long. So we're gonna cool it off just a little bit. And admittedly, I mean, I don't know why, but I didn't know this until recently, that this was Gigi's composition also. It's always associated with random people just because random people have done it. But this is such an amazing composition. We're gonna play Social Call.
We're in role play, so just real briefly, in the early time period, especially like in the 40s playing bebop, this was the primary mute that trumpet players used. Not this style, a better style, cup mute, they call this a cup mute. And you'll hear a lot of trumpet players use this style mute until Miles started playing the Harmon, and then that all changed. But up until that point, and particularly on this recording with R. Farmer, he's playing cup mute, so we're in role play.
The other side of role play is I'm playing the alto I used on the Ben Riley recordings. I haven't played this horn in I don't know how many years, but it was the one that reminded me the closest of that sound. I mean, I have so many horns, but like, I chose this one for today. Hopefully it suits the music. You guys good? Can we go home? You sure? I heard this is a union house. They're gonna close soon. No, we got one more. Actually, and checking all this music out, we found this to be the cutest one. And you can't lose with the blues. And we're gonna close out with Blue Concept. Elliot Bernard on the piano. Chris Berger on the bass. Sylvester Garnett on the drums. Freddie Hendricks on the trumpet. My name is Bruce Williams. Thank you so much for coming out to celebrate Gigi Gryce. Don't forget him. Keep looking and touring. Thank you so much for having us. Thank you, Jazz Society. Thank you, Noel. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, everybody. Thank you all so much for having us.